If you've ever lived or spent an extended amount of time in New York City, you'd know that many of the cab drivers are from the Dominican Republic, the island nation also known for producing Major League Baseball players. The first thing most cab drivers ask is, where do you want to go? The process works when you give the driver an address and boom, within minutes you arrive at your destination. A process is a series of actions or steps taken in order to achieve a particular end. A life plan is a process combined with patience. Today, many of us are distracted by politicians, the news cycle, unproductive habits, and as a result, do not have a life plan. That's the equivalent of stopping a cab just to sit in the back seat. Back in 1986, I was working at a boating supply store in New Rochelle, New York. One of my co-workers had access to his cousin's 40-foot boat. The owner of the yacht was the chief operating officer and co-chair of what at the time was America's largest gold jewelry manufacturer, with over 700 employees. One weeknight while hanging out on the boat, my coworker revealed to me his cousin's success wasn't inherited or a fluke. A big part of his success derived from a life plan he had written for himself. The plan was where the idea of starting his company originated. That day, I made my first attempt at writing a life plan. Through this process, I've gotten to know myself. Let me share with you what I've learned. Tell you a little bit about myself. I've been coaching elite travel baseball for over 20 years. I've played with or coached over 50 professional baseball players. Pedro Borbon Jr., Alex Arias, Rafael Novoa, Dylan Betances, Adam Ottavino, Pedro Beato, and Harrison Bader are former and current Major League Baseball players I've crossed paths with. Today, I own Stoop Juice, an organic juice bar in Park Slope, Brooklyn, in business since 2012. My dream is for every neighborhood in America to have a Stoop Juice. Back in the winter of 1983, during my sophomore year of high school, I found myself waking up at 5:30 a.m. in order to get to a 7:59 a.m. tryout at a Brooklyn Junior High School gymnasium. My high school teammate and future member of the 1995 World Series champions Atlanta Braves, Pedro Borbon Jr., took the 90-minute subway ride with me. Why travel so far from the Bronx in the middle of January to try out in Brooklyn? The team we were trying out for was the same team 8 months before produced the 1982 #1 draft pick of the Major League Baseball draft, Sean Dunston. Pedro and I made the team, and in March of 1983, Steve Nathanson, Sean's high school coach, became the varsity baseball coach at my high school. Being around this level of competition exposed me to Major League Baseball scouts. These scouts would file highly objective reports of baseball players considered prospects. A point system between 2 to 8, with 8 being outstanding, was utilized. Knowing this, I focused on the 7 key criteria scouts gauge performance both my junior and senior year of high school. I was disappointed when I didn't get drafted my senior year, but not surprised. 2 years later, I was in college majoring in business. After college, I went to work for Michael Anthony Jewelers and witnessed firsthand a life plan realized. Most of us have to work for a living. Do you have control of your professional life? A plan with realistic goals provides a strategy for managing your personal and professional life. A common business strategy is vertical integration. This happens when a company expands its business operations into different steps of the same production path, such as when a manufacturer owns its supply and or distributor, Ask yourself, do you own the land your business is in? If yes, good. Do most of your business come from one customer? If yes, you have little control of your situation and you are violating the control principle. The key is to control risk and probability improvement. I got fired from my first head coaching job as a travel coach before the first game. The organization was a good organization. It checked off most of the important boxes. The team was adequately funded, and the culture encouraged players to play the game the right way. Despite this, the director of the program had a hard time delegating responsibility, plus we had fundamental differences in how we did things. The coaching position lacked autonomy. The same is true in business. When starting a new venture, a business plan has to be written, funds have to be secured, and a uniform vision has to be in place. Barriers to entry are the existence of high startup costs or other obstacles that prevent new competitors from easily entering an industry or an area of business. Many travel baseball teams are tougher to make than high school teams. Travel teams usually have a larger pool of players to choose from. Making a D1 college baseball team is even tougher. In college, there are approximately 299 NCAA Division I baseball programs, with each team being allowed to offer a maximum of 11.7 scholarships. Securing startup money is an obstacle when starting a business. Billionaire Mark Cuban, as seen on Shark Tank, he says, "Only morons start business with a loan." The logic is simple. If the business isn't successful, you only lose your money and maybe gain an expensive lesson in finance. When the money is borrowed, the money is gone and you still have debt. I started Stoop Juice with personal savings and help from my family. Economist Thomas Sowell stated, "It takes considerable knowledge just to realize the extent of your own ignorance." Entrepreneurs have to understand, utilize, and apply both business, finance, and economic principles to be successful. Ask yourself, how easy or difficult is it for someone else to get in your business? If anyone off the street can start the business you're in, you're violating the entry principle. Business opportunities come from problem solving. The problem your business is solving has to have an element of difficulty, since in the difficulty lies the opportunity. Competitors that find what you do too hard are only looking for easy ways to make money. If what you do is easy, it too is violating barriers of entry principle. From each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. As history has proven, Karl Marx was brilliant, but a little off. Needs are not rational. Many are based on customs and learned behavior. This is why we're inundated by advertisements everywhere we look. These commercials offer solutions to describe problems. When problems are solved, money is exchanged. By providing better service, filling needs, making things better, satisfying wants and cravings leads to success. So do what you love with a full understanding of the market realities of the goods and services you're providing. The healthiest of healthiest food service businesses is doomed to fail if its locations are surrounded by uninformed and uninterested customers. In a city with 500 swimming instructors and only 5 people needing swimming lessons, how are all these instructors going to pay for their bills? So, If the market realities in your vocation doesn't provide enough money for you to live your desired quality of life, learn to live with less or change what you're doing. Retrain and gain skills for work that's in demand to obtain desired income. German philosopher Martin Heidegger stated, "Time is not a thing, the nothing that which is, and yet it remains constant, and it's passing away without being something temporal like the being of time." Can't make out what that means? Then you may understand another German philosopher, Friedrich Nietzsche. He stated, "There are horrible people who, instead of solving a problem, tangle it up and make it harder to solve for anyone who wants to deal with it." He added, "Whoever does not know to hit the nail on the head should not be asked to hit it at all." Ultimately, your product or service must exist in time and stand alone. Does your product or service serve while you're away? The best compliment I've ever received on a baseball field came from the heckles of a group of parents from an opposing team. During team tryouts, I use the same process every year. I reverse engineer the season through a visualization exercise. Starting day one of the winter workouts, I have players close their eyes for 10 minutes while I describe in detail pre-game, game time, and post-game routines. All new team members have a 6-week grace period to fully understand all team policies and procedures. After 4 weeks, new members are warned of consequences after every infraction. Every consequence has an individual or team component. For example, after grace period, for every second a team player is late member must run one 60-yard sprint. So if you're late 10 minutes, that's 600 sprints. All team members have to stay after game or practice until late player finishes sprints. To wrap up sooner, each member of a team of 25 players can run 24 sprints each to complete the 600 sprints. Out of self-interest, players already on the team teach new players the importance of policies and procedures from day one. Team members become responsible for each other and communicate constantly with one another. The goal is for team members to self-regulate their own behavior and become accountable to each other. So when I overheard an opposing team parent shout towards my direction, "Anybody can coach this team and win. It's the players who do everything and not the coaches," I just smiled. Honoring time by creating processes that can exist without you make it possible for these systems to run and stay around in your absence. Anytime a creative effort can exist independent of you, it can also sell independent of you. Before the printing press was invented, any writings and drawings had to be completed painstakingly by hand. For a moment, try to imagine a modern classroom with almost no books or paper with funny-looking symbols on them. What you just imagined was a world without the printing press. Scale is about easily replicating processes, services, goods, and procedures, like when movable type increased the ability to print pamphlets in the 1400s. This allowed information to flow easier, quicker to more people. Today, what would happen if a food service business comes up with a process to profitably offer healthy food choices, leading to a healthier American population and reducing healthcare expense? Ideally, the next step would be to repeat this process throughout the country as much as possible. The noblest and most sustainable businesses must provide high value to its customers to survive, while also bringing in at least the same amount of money it spends. Look at the banking industry in the United States. Banks emphasize profits over quality. The top 3 banks in issue capital derived from private business. Joseph Morgan, the founder of J.P. Morgan, later to become J.P. Morgan Chase, owned a stagecoach business. Amadeu Peter Gianni, founder of Bank of America, was part owner of a wholesale produce company, and Henry Wells and William Fargo owned the courier business that competed with the Pony Express. These businesses transitioned into banks when their industries became obsolete or their operations were more profitable providing financial services. Banks utilized their business acumen and knowledge of financial principles to determine risks when granting a loan to a small business. Despite my 20-year personal banking relationship with my bank, I was denied a loan to start Stoop Juice. My loan officer determined that my inexperience in food service and the high rate of failed businesses in the competitive food service market doomed me as a professional. He said if I created a viable business for 3 or more years, he could assist me in securing a loan if I wanted to expand or grow my business to more outlets. Today, after 5 years in business, banks are willing to help me, provided I can show I'm running a profitable business. I've always dreamt of a Stoop Juice franchise. In my dream, I would license for a fee to qualified parties access to my business proprietary knowledge, processes, and trademark in order to facilitate other entrepreneurs who are eager to sell organic juices and smoothies using the Stoop Juice name. In exchange, the franchisees would pay me the initial startup costs and the annual licensing fees. Are life plans a thing of the past? The answer is no. How you see yourself in relationship to external things go a long way to shaping your perception of reality. We are living in a time of frequent job changes and millennials demanding that business approach them differently and adjust the customer experience to meet their needs. I asked 3 executives, each with 20 or more years at their respective companies, how they've been able to go against the job hopping trend. First, Maria L. She works for a prestigious marketing firm and is currently a vice president with a salary of over $200,000. I think it is fear. I read something recently which confirmed my risk-averse side. Also, being raised by an FDNY father who has the perspective that your employer takes care of you for life. I wish. I have a high tolerance for pain, I think. Moving to another ad agency? No. Always felt like the grass is not greener. Starting my own business equals scary. Raul has worked for a private real estate company owned by a family listed in the Forbes Top 50 Richest Families. He has worked and done close to every job in the accounting department he helps manage. It's the norm for potential hires to give me resumes with a pattern of leaving jobs usually within 2 years. It's up to us to challenge and evaluate employees' performance during the first 3 months to see if we have a keeper. After the 3 months, it's 1 day at a time. The biggest obstacle for people who do not advance in my company is an unwillingness to do the work of new positions and prove competency before securing title and pay associated with position. The most important habit that has helped me is that I'm always sharpening my saw. By this I mean I stay current on all the accounting laws and look for opportunities to go the extra mile. Let me give you an example. We hired a consulting firm to help us transition into a new accounting system for next year. I took it upon myself to look at instructional videos online of companies who have made the transition using the same consultant and having 1 or more years running. In these videos, knowing what I know about our present system, I notice a filing procedure, if done this calendar year instead of next, would save us millions of dollars in tax liabilities. When I approached my vice president, she had reservations of my claim, since I was talking about an unimplemented system. I asked her to conference call the consultant to verify the accuracy of my statement, and if she'd like, I'd sit in the call. As it turned out, I was correct, and my vice president allowed me to present my proposal to the board. Gary M. has worked for a high-profile, publicly traded, multinational manufacturing agency for 22 years. He credits his bullheadedness and ability to challenge himself when opportunities are presented as keys to his success. I had a 3-hour conversation with one of my engineers who recently quit about the same issue. The reason people jump from job to job is a lack of opportunity to reinvent themselves. It takes work and self-reflection to admit a flawed or misaligned approach to work. The effort, need, and perspective you have at a job changes as your living situation changes. A resume is a piece of paper packaged to highlight what applicants consider his or her strengths to new employers and carries no history. By history, I mean it doesn't show potential employers the tendencies of an applicant, their abilities to communicate, and pass judgments. Reinventing yourself and self-reflection at a current job may be difficult for some, since a flawed approach may reveal itself. Most resumes I see with short stays at many companies usually end up in the garbage. The brain responds emotionally and often illogically when forced to make decisions based on little or conflicting evidence. These types of choices are known as ambiguous decisions and are different from risky decisions. In a risky decision, a person is uncertain about the outcome of their choice, but has an idea of the probability. In an ambiguous decision, a person is ignorant of both factors. Ambiguous decisions are more common when we don't do the work to educate ourselves or take the time to self-reflect. It takes considerable knowledge just to realize the extent of our own ignorance. This explains why, regardless of intellect, most of us change our behavior as we age. Like when in 1918, German philosopher and prodigy Ludwig Wittgenstein, then aged 29, completed the Tractatus Logico Philosophicus. The project had a broad aim to identify the relationship between language and reality and to define the limits of science. English philosopher Bertrand Russell viewed the Tractatus as an attempt to set out a logically perfect language, building on Russell's own work. In the years between writing both the Tractatus and another piece titled Philosophical Investigations, which was published posthumously after Wittgenstein's death, Wittgenstein came to reject the idea where the ultimate symbols from which a language should or even could be constructed, thus becoming the Tractatus' biggest critic. According to Wittgenstein's philosophical investigations, philosophical problems arise when language is forced from its proper home into a metaphysical environment. where all the familiar and necessary landmarks and contextual clues are removed. This metaphysical environment is like being a member of a quote-unquote perfect family, where the conditions are apparently perfect for a philosophically and logically perfect language. All problems can be solved without muddying the effect of everyday context, but where, precisely because of lack of different opinions, ideas and language, communicating amongst family members is not needed. Wittgenstein would argue that family members must escape the facade of the "it goes without saying" approach and return to the rough ground of ordinary language in use for family members to effectively communicate and to avoid ambiguity. Theoretical economist Kenneth J. Arrow mostly writes for fellow economists to avoid misinterpretations of his articles. Arrow proved that social choice or social decision-making is not rational. The transitivity principle is the preference of ordering alternatives based on their relative utility, a process which results in an optimal quote-unquote choice. So if group members prefer oranges to apples and apples to pears, can we say with 100% certainty all members should prefer oranges to pears all of the time? The answer is no, since there cannot be a completely consistent meaning to collective rationality. We have at some point a relation of pure power in decision-making. Economics can explain individual choices. It cannot explain group decision-making. Arrow has also written on the economics of healthcare, describing the moral hazards of insurance. Individuals who are insured take more risk than had they not been insured. Arrow also proposed a solution for the adverse selection problem, or the tendency of the elderly, sick, those in dangerous jobs, or in high-risk lifestyles to get insurance. Meanwhile, those with low probability of getting sick lack the urgency and often choose not to purchase insurance. The solution? Arrow proposed a single-payer system where everyone is covered by health insurance. No one can attempt to provide plans that appeal to only low-risk groups, and insurance companies don't have to worry about low-risk individuals dropping out of the system and significantly raising the average cost of insuring people, which in turn would encourage additional healthy individuals to opt out of insurance. It is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from the regards to their own interests. Adam Smith's quote from The Wealth of Nations is still true today. Smith also said, "The real tragedy of the poor is the poverty of their aspiration." Ask yourself, why do you think so many Americans lead unhealthy lives? Until we resolve healthcare in America, we should attempt to lead a balanced life by exercising, making healthy food choices, and becoming more mindful. No more kicking the healthcare can down the road. The problem with our current approach is that we haven't found a workable process to deal with the unspoken but paramount issue separating most citizens and the insurance companies and preventing us from truly putting our citizens first. That's right, it's fear. Fear, yes, fear. The citizens' fear of being taken advantage of, and the insurance company's fear of losing money. As for politicians, they act as agents in these negotiations. I'm hoping for our leaders to rise above partisanship and get to work. They can create a way, a path to work with citizens in a format that eliminates the ingrained fears of both the people and the insurance companies. In a book titled Let's Get Real or Let's Not Play by Randy Illig, the authors begin their journey in creating a process that will allow sellers, in this case insurance company, to really seek out client success, in this case the American people. The first and foremost are outlined by 5 key beliefs. The first belief is that both the insurance companies and the American people want the same thing. The second thing is intent counts more than technique. The third is that solution has no inherent value. So there's not one solution, quick fix for everything. The fourth is methodology matters. So how you approach things and how you do things and how organized you are matters. There has to be a process. The fifth and final thing is world-class inquiry precedes world-class advocacy. So to inquire is to listen empathically. Through inquiry or simply listening, we eliminate all ambiguities in search of solutions to increase probability of success. In this country, we are condemned to be free because once we're thrown into the world, we are responsible for everything we do. Through coaching, I discovered that while you teach, you also learn. Every player I worked with in baseball had an interest for baseball. Those players I coached who played Major League Baseball chose to have a proactive belief in themselves. So in essence, what you believe in your heart is what you are and what you become. I learned self-belief is a choice individuals can only make for themselves, regardless of who their coach or teacher may be. All we can do is try to nurture and bring this out, nothing more. According to Plato, for a man to conquer himself is the first and noblest of all victories. All advice I offer today is directed at myself in order to complement my routine. Today, I use a text reading app on my smartphone to listen to my life plan during my morning runs in Prospect Park. So the next time you're in the backseat of a cab, know where you want the driver to take you, and more importantly, know where you're planning to take yourself.